Welcome to the drone presentation at Michigan Robotics Week. The theme of this panel is how drone technology is set to transform Michigan and how you can get involved in this cool new technology. I'm going to have the panel members introduce themselves. Chris, would you start?
I'm Lieutenant.
Oh, mic's on? Is it on? There you go.
Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Chris Bush with the Michigan State Police, and I'm the commander of the Field Support and Aviation section of State Police.
I am Danny Ellis. I'm the CEO of SkySpecs, a local drone startup company that came out of University of Michigan.
My name is Harry Arnold. I'm the CEO and founder of Detroit Drone.
Hi, I'm Ella Atkins. I'm a faculty member down the street at the University of Michigan's Aerospace Engineering Department, and I've been flying drones for research as well as education purposes since the 1990s.
All right, so I'll pose the first question. How is drone technology set to transform everyone's lives here? Chris, would you like to take that?
Sure, I'll take it. Recently, the State Police had became the first state to get FAA authorization to fly a drone throughout the state of Michigan. And we started the process approximately about a year and a half ago. And one of the things that we wanted to do is we're always looking for ways to use technology to make our job safer and easier. So we jumped into this, and one of the things that we're going to do is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous parts of my job is working out on the expressways policing accidents. And we kind of heard today that the future is going to bring us some cars that will make it safer for that. But one of the things that we wanted to do is be able to clear accidents quicker, and that's what drone technology does for us, is we can get overhead and then take that data that we're getting, dump it into some systems, and then do our reconstruction back at the office rather than spending 2 hours out there on that. Another aspect is anytime we can take something and put it up and get an aerial view, maybe, as you all know, the world is not a safe place, but when someone has a gun and we cannot put one of our officers in harm's way and we can use some of this technology to give us that view, it's an advantage for us. So there's lots of different ways that it's going to help the state police, I believe, and law enforcement in general.
So Chris, just to understand, you're the first state police department to get approval to do this?
Yes, we're, and one of the reasons we wanted to do it is just because it only takes one mistake, so we wanted to do it right so that we can kind of pave the way for others to follow. But yeah, we're the first one to have an entire state.
Excellent. Danny, what's your take on the question?
Yeah, so our company is focused on software for drones and higher level intelligence. So our first product, we're bringing collision avoidance to drones, focused on commercial drones and applications. So our customers are guys that are harnessing themselves up on ropes to go inspect bridges or wind turbines or cell towers. If you've never looked that up online, go look at what they do on a daily basis. And they're usually dangling 350 feet in the air to take a look at our infrastructure and make sure that it's safe. And so they came to us and said they wanted to start flying drones, but none of them are drone pilots. And so our technology is allowing them to fly a drone with a little bit of experience, but not much, and preventing them from colliding with whatever that structure is. And so we're targeting these applications where businesses really want to find a cheaper, safer way to go about their current jobs using drone technology, but not requiring them to be expert roboticists to do so. From there, we all have heard Amazon saying they are going to deliver packages someday. If and when they attempt to do that, technology like collision avoidance, in our opinion, is going to be required. You don't want your package coming to your front doorstep and your kids being in the front lawn and the drone not seeing them. And so that's where we're focused. We think every business is going to find a way to use drones someday, and we want to make it as safe and easy as possible.
And Danny, why are you in Ann Arbor? How did you end up here?
Yeah, so we started at the University of Michigan. Ella here was one of our advisors 6 years ago. We decided to start a student team. So we were just a group of students that wanted to build drones for fun. We had no intention of being a business. But after that was successful for 3 years, we, through the University of Michigan, had the opportunity to join their incubator program and try to start a business. We were 7 engineers. We had no idea what we were doing, but the entrepreneurship community in the area has been growing rapidly. And from all the support in the area, we've been able to raise $1.35 million to date, and employ 7 guys full time, and start making drone technology here in Ann Arbor. We have traveled to New York. We lived there for 4 months working in Techstars, the business accelerator program. When that program was done, we came back here because right here in Ann Arbor and in all of Michigan, actually, the cost of living is so low. We can take the little bit of money we raise compared to what you'd raise on the coast and go a long way. And the support here is tremendous. So we would never imagine being anywhere else right now.
Harry, how would you answer that question? How are drones impacting your life?
Hello, yeah, about 5-6 years ago, started flying commercially, doing pictures for businesses like construction, working with the Detroit Fire Department, doing CMS inspections of windmills and things like that. And so I've been doing the flying commercially with Detroit Drone for about the last 5 or 6 years. And recently we've started a racing league. Could you roll that beautiful beam footage? And with little drones like this, they don't have obstacle avoidance technology, which makes it real fun to watch. And so you fly them, and they have a camera in the front end, and you're actually wearing these goggles and piloting it. First FPV, or first person view, is the acronym. And so you fly around, and there's a transponder on the bottom that counts laps, and it's real exciting. But I just wanted to show that, especially a lot of young people out there. It's real exciting. People are 3D printing their own 250 racers. They're 250 millimeter motor to motor, and it's something you can get into at low cost. And it's racing, and everybody loves competition, and we're doing it kind of a league basis all across the world. So that's why I'm here.
So Harry, 5 or 6 years ago, you had to be one of the first people using drones commercially in the state, eh?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 other ones, and like mentors and people that helped me out, but I jumped right into it full time. I needed a job. And some of the other people were engineers or doctors or whatever and just did it on the side, but I jumped into it as a full-time business, so we got a running start.
How many people are involved in your racing league now?
We have a meetup group that we schedule the races through with about 400 members here locally, and we have people that travel from other cities to take part in our races. Next one's at the Brighton Legacy Center on April 25th, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
Ella, you're up.
I'm having the urge to stand up because that's what we do in lecture. So what we now call drones have been around since before the Wright brothers. They've been used to test strange flight concepts. Even the Wright brothers flew unmanned before they flew manned. And in doing so, they found some design flaws that allowed them to not kill themselves when they first climbed in the airplane. So the notion of the drone is not new. The notion of its use for education, for research, and for commercial purposes is also not new. What's new is the notion of flying them in or near populated areas where you could interact in a good way or a bad way with people. We've kind of lost touch of the fact that, from my perspective, students who are engaged in research and development should be able to, again, fly what they imagine. With the technology we have now, it's so much easier to do that than it was 100 years ago. And it's a lot safer. We just have to remember to use common sense. Take those extra 15 minutes to drive out to the cornfield or the big field of grass where you have permission instead of flying over Central Campus. It doesn't matter whether you're a hobbyist, an educator, or someone who hopes to use their drone for commercial purposes or law enforcement. What matters is common sense and doing what you love to do. You know, for all the kids, pay attention to the adults that tell you that you actually could hurt someone when you fly. And for all the adults, I hope that you're paying attention to the regulatory process enough to realize that we need the freedom to fly our ideas without waiting 90 days or without calling air traffic control, even if we only want to fly 2 feet off the ground.
Thank you. Now, on your tables are some index cards if you want to send some questions up. I'm going to pose the next question, but the question after that is going to come from the audience. So cue those questions up. Chris, how'd you get started? What's your origin story? How did you get to where you are now?
Well, I started with state police 20 years ago, and you know, it was funny. Yesterday I was at Henry Ford. I took my son there and showed him a typewriter, and but it's, you know, as I promoted through different jobs, I landed in overseeing our aviation and a lot of our specialty teams, and I kept hearing about this technology, so I just started investigating what it could do for us as an agency. And I tell you, all the young kids it's just amazing how bright our children are and the technology that they're developing, and it's really exciting. I joke in some of our meetings that I need to hire some 12-year-olds to show me how to use a lot of this stuff, but it's so true that they get it, and it's exciting. And you know, I enjoy coming to these things because I learn more and more every day. And again, I go back to the safety of our citizens and our officers. Anything I can do to keep our members safe and our citizens safe, I'm for it. So that's kind of why we got into this arena, and you know, we'll continue to look for it, and you know, we'll be looking to some of these startup companies and others that can help us along the way, and you know, especially the young children.
Are there any opportunities to use this technology with the state police?
Well, we're actually been in talks with a couple. We'd like to start internships where we can get some college students to come and work with us and more or less teach us some of the things that they can do to help us in our goals.
Danny, how did you get started?
Yeah, so I came to U of M in 2006 to be an aerospace engineer, and my goal was to go work at one of the big companies building big planes. And after my junior year, I was in 2008, and with the recession, there weren't too many internships available. And so I was looking for some way to stay on campus. And I started working at the Student Project Center on campus, where there are like 35 plus student teams that are just building projects. And the stipulation of me working there was that I didn't join one of the student teams. And so I said, that's fine, I'm just gonna work here my last year at school. And after working kind of in all those students and seeing all the cool projects they were building, I realized going into my senior year, I wanted to build a drone for my senior project. And so right like a week before school started my senior year, I found a competition online. It was the International Aerial Robotics Competition. I found 15 students. I got the university to fund us. We raised $30,000 in the first 5 days from concept to actually making the team. And all of a sudden, the Michigan Autonomous Aerial Vehicles team was born. As it turns out, I was able to keep my job at the Student Project Center because the professor running it said, well, I never said you couldn't start a team. I just said you couldn't join one. For there, I ran the student team through my senior year. And by the end of it, this professor told me, he's like, well, you're not leaving. You're going to grad school here. And I kind of looked at him funny. I was like, well, I never really planned on going to grad school. He's like, well, you're going to keep running this team. And so he hired me on to teach his class and go to school. And so I continued to do that for another 3 years. And while we were doing it, we would have about 50 students per year go through the team. I got Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin to sponsor it. And all of a sudden, something started to evolve. When we started the team, 3D Robotics, DJI, they didn't exist. You could hardly go buy a small drone like this. There were a few out there, but they weren't on Amazon Prime. And so we built everything ourselves. And by the end of that, we kind of sat around a room one day, the founders of the team, and looked at each other and said, I think there's a business opportunity here. And I haven't left since. So it's kind of just stumbling into it and just wanting to build drones for fun. And here we are today doing it full time.
Harry, how did you get involved? What made you first get interested in this technology?
Well, my father was a teacher of photography, graphic arts. So I grew up around cameras and dark rooms, and I've been involved in photography, videography, filmmaking for like 20 or 30 years. And when I was also interested in RC, flew helicopters, airplanes, control line planes, and around 5 or 6 years ago seems to be the magic moment. Drones and the stabilization systems that control them to make them conceivable to fly matured very, very quickly, and to the point where you could carry a camera, and also camera technology improved so quickly, and the GoPro came out, so now all of a sudden you had a 70 or 80 gram camera that could do commercial work. I mean, it might not have been NBC News quality, but it was commercial quality. You could shoot 1080 and stuff like that. And so for me, it started out, a drone started out as being a really cool tripod where I could get shots that nobody else got. And what I find as far as the marketing of commercial drone work, when you see a video that's shot with a drone or a picture that's shot with a drone, for 1 split second, you stare at the picture and say, how'd they get that shot? Because you can't understand how the crowd is going underneath it. Well, I didn't say that. Well, you can't understand how the camera is moving through the space in the way it is. And then you say, oh, that's a drone. But that half second or a second that your mind goes through that process is priceless to somebody that's trying to get imagery, because it locks you into what they're trying to show you for that in a very analytic way for an extra half second or second. So it's really taken off. I always say my grandfather saw the introduction of the car. My father saw the introduction of the television. I saw the introduction of the internet. And you young people, you're seeing the introduction of the drone. These things are going to change the world, and you're right here in the delivery room.
You know, that's one of the interesting things about being here in Michigan. You're right at ground zero of not only these important changes in the transportation industry. When we talk about transportation in Michigan, we think of rolling vehicles, but there's also this transformation in drones. And there's so many applications, and it's really interesting to hear that kids can get involved with this racing league at a very low price. Ella?
So I think I feel kind of old sitting here right now. So I first started working with aerospace in the 1980s, an unspecified time frame in that range. I got my pilot's license, private pilot for Cessnas in 1993. Then I came back to grad school here. I quickly transitioned from focusing on artificial intelligence for multimedia, which was very popular at the time, to flying, because that's what I loved, was flying. And I discovered even back then, and I think many in the industry already knew it, that software and sensors were really the key to different missions, different capabilities, and safety in aerospace more generally, whether there were people on board or not. In the 1990s, as a PhD student, I was very fortunate to work with some faculty and this local hobbyist who's awesome. He's been flying since the 1950s, to experience how model aircraft can let sensors and software and different shapes of wings and so forth get up into the air at a fraction of the cost that it would take, and also much safer than it is to actually climb on board a plane with experimental systems. I ended up putting a little bit of that in my thesis, but what I learned from that is that even though we do aerospace, we can realize what we're developing at a very early stage with experiments that don't just live in a lab, that get up into the air. So ever since then, I've been trying to use unmanned aircraft, drones, model aircraft, whatever you want to call them, both for education and research purposes. One of the things that I have really focused on is safety. And some of you will sit there going, well, if you focus on safety, what does that even apply to with these drones, right? We need the FAA to come in and tell us what safe means. Well, something that everybody needs to realize is that safety is not just a function of whether there's a person on board. It's a function of the performance of the software, of the sensors, of everything on board the vehicle. So right now, in today, it's probably safer to fly a drone with someone well-trained who knows what to look for, make sure the batteries are charged and so forth, over a crowd than it is to fly a police helicopter that's manned,
because if something fails, you have something that big falling down onto somebody, as opposed to something that weighs more than 1,000 pounds. This is not recognized, but it's something that we need to think of and fundamentally kind of get past so that we don't have a prejudice safety-wise for manned aircraft. My own research is focused on autonomy, and one of the questions I asked is, what safety is offered by the crew in a commercial transport aircraft that couldn't be achieved by autonomy? I think that's going to be a question that faces the drone world as well as the manned aircraft world. So that's where I am right now.
All right, we have our first question from the audience. This is to the panel. What should or could high schools do to start doing legally to start training students with drones? What recommendations to the panel? Please step up.
Yeah, I'll actually take that one first. As many of you are probably a part of, or at least aware of in this room, First Robotics, I think, is one of the best programs in high school. When I was in high school, we didn't have that on the other side of the state. I wish we did. And at SkySpecs, we've actually hired 4 high school interns last year. Have another one still on board this year. And it amazes me how much just that program is teaching students not only about how to operate robots, but how to build them and actually knowing every little piece about them. I don't think it's enough to just know how to fly a drone. You really need to know the system inside and out, so when there is a failure, you understand why. And so I think that program is one of the ways that the high schools can get involved. And legally, I mean, you can do a lot indoors. You don't have to worry about the laws if you're indoors. And so I think, just keep pushing for those types of applications. I mean, even this racing drone in a gymnasium would be a long way to train high schoolers.
Yes, hello. Yeah, and you see the net over there, that supposedly is the cage for doing stuff with robots that wouldn't be safe, so a system like that would let you fly at one end of the high school gym. I was fortunate enough to get into it as a modeler, so I buy parts at the hobby shop. I buy sheets of carbon fiber, I buy carbon fiber tubing, I buy wood, glue, solder, and so I think a lot of the basics of science are really important to, like he said, learn what goes into making this hunk of metal and a battery and carbon fiber fly. And, knowing about voltage, DC voltage, wattage, ohms, resistance, how a brushless motor functions, and then moving into the computer side of it, there's a flight controller. The newer ones are 32-bit computers, and they work to stabilize the drone. When you fly it, you're not controlling the 4 motors individually, and you'll see they have demo ones all over there. You're giving general go up, go right, go left commands, and the flight controller, which is a little $20 circuit board, is processing your commands and reading the attitude of the drone, which way it's leaning, and adjusting the motors accordingly to keep it level and torque the motors to make it turn right and left. So it's really technical and it's really basic, and I pray that young people are exposed to that side of it, because there's a company I'm sure everybody's heard of is DJI. They made $500 billion last year selling plastic drones that have a do not open or you'll void the warranty sticker on the bottom of them. We need to be able to build our own drones from the ground up using circuit boards, Arduino boards, or whatever, motors, stuff we can get and learn how that operates. If we buy into this whole DJI thing, we're going to give up more of, like the gentleman from Ford was talking about, our engineering and things that made this country great. So I beg you to please get the kids involved into sciences that would enable technology like this.
So I want to make a plea to teachers as well as students. Don't separate the math and the physics from the hands-on experiences. That's so critical. We have the technology that he was just talking about right now to put really simple, safe, lightweight, low-cost things, whether they're ground robots with US First or little flying robots. What he just described was the perfect example of physics, where you have forces and moments, and they're acting together. If I look back to when I first learned physics, if I had had something like this, I wouldn't have stopped doing physics at night, right? I would have I would have been up the next morning and, my family would have been like, you look terrible, but I would have learned physics. So embrace that, whether you're an adult that's wondering whether these things have anything educational to offer, or whether you're a child that has the opportunity to go into a teacher and say, I have this thing at home that I built, and it would be really cool to demonstrate this concept in physics.
All right, next question. Can a drone really be a replacement for a conventional package delivery system? Is it more buzz than practicality?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I have a personal opinion on how this is going to work. I truly don't believe you're going to have a little 4-rotor drone carrying a package from an Amazon warehouse to your front door. But in the world where we have autonomous cars and where your cargo planes, as Ella was mentioning, don't even have a human on board, don't even have a life support system on board, it's just a cylinder with packages in it that's flying through the air. You have that robotic plane land at the airport, it loads your autonomous UPS truck or whatever brand truck is carrying it to the cities. It drives to your neighborhood and it parks in the middle of your neighborhood. But if there's no human driving the truck, how does the package get to your doorstep? And that's the distance that I think these small vehicles are perfect for. 80% of packages that Amazon ships can be carried by a small drone. And if those are the packages that, it just parks in the middle of the neighborhood and makes that short trip, you don't need a lot of battery life for that. You don't need a lot of payload for that. And so that's when I believe, you'll see drones actually dropping packages off at your front doorstep. I don't think they're going to be covering the skies. We won't be able to see the sun because there'll be so many drones in the sky. I don't think that'll happen, but I do think they have a place in autonomous delivery when the entire system, front to back, is robotic.
All right. I agree with a lot of what Amazon has done over the years. I'm afraid of the implications of package delivery to our freedom to own our backyards, and that's why I stood up. This is a big deal. If you look at what Amazon's mission is, it is not efficient for them to pop up to 500 feet, to go over your neighbor's house before they pop down into your backyard. You're going to give them permission by signing a little box at the bottom that says acknowledge terms and conditions. How many of you ever read that tiny font print? Well, part of that could very easily say, you thereby give prime air permission to land in your backyard. Well, I think the real question is, does the fact that our backyard is now navigable, meaning that this is safe to fly in our backyards, does that mean that this airspace is now owned and controlled by the FAA? I believe that it's not, but there's a fight going on in Washington right now that says differently, that says that not only can the FAA ban your flights for research or commercial purposes, they also will not allow you to fly what you want, even though you own all of the land, right? So you have this notion where eventually you're going to need the equivalent of a driver's license and a car license to fly this off your back deck. And that's scary. The problem with Amazon, though, is that it's in their best interest for the FAA to establish air traffic rules for your backyard. So my vision is not of the skies blackening with drones, but sitting peacefully on my back deck, which happens to be in a rural area away from town, if you go to my other back deck. And Amazon will have a corridor of airplanes that disturb the view between me and my lake, and there's nothing I can do about it because the air traffic control says that it's okay. So it's possible that they'll be able to do it technologically, but there's a huge regulatory issue that we have to deal with.
They have a couple things working against them. First of all, with multi-copters, which are the general heading of things with multiple propellers that keep them up. Only thing you have holding it up is wattage from a battery and motors. With the airplane, you have airfoil and principles like that help with the lift, so you can fly those for dozens, scores of miles for hours at a time. With these, you are limited by battery technology. There are some advanced systems that will give you a little bit of flight, but these aren't the optimum way to deliver a package by any means. I think it's a publicity stunt by Amazon. And the second thing that they have going against it is me saying that I'm within my rights flying over a person's personal property with their permission to take pictures of their house at their request is one thing. But for me to say I'm being paid to deliver a package and I'm going over numerous other people's property, that's a whole different thing. And so I think they're throwing it out there to get some free publicity like a lot of people are doing about with the whole drone thing, when really it's kind of a non-starter. If you look, they went to Australia to work on a vertical, a VTOL kind of system with a wing, and now the regulations are taking so long, they've actually moved the program to Canada to test it. So I think it's a non-starter here.
So I disagree, but I think that they do need to move to Canada and Australia to get past the regulatory issues. But I don't think we should be limited in vision to multicopters. I think that one of the exciting things about aerospace now is that we can fly the different shapes, and we can sense what they're doing, and we can control them. Do I know what Amazon is doing behind its back doors? No. Maybe it's a publicity stunt, maybe it's serious. But I think all of us should imagine the possibilities of having a vehicle, sensors, and software that could allow us to go wherever we wanted for point-to-point delivery or data collection.
All right, next question. Is it possible or even likely that drones will eventually migrate to transport people rather than just cargo or sensors?
Yes.
Yes, and it will do so because we can prove that it's safer.
And the other thing is, most of the flights you're on today are basically autonomous, so it's not that far away. Those two pilots are there for your sanity, and that's almost about
There
it.
are no pilot landings on commercial airliners. They're all...
We have the technology, if we allow it to override the crews, to never again fly into a building or a mountain. It's time that we use it and support it.
Next question. Are there farming applications for drones?
Yeah, I think it's observing crops is already being done. They've even been applying pesticides with drones for 20, 25 years in Japan. So it's definitely an application. For what we've seen in our push to be on wind farms, it's actually one of the more dangerous environments to fly right now because you do have crop dusters flying over 100 feet off the ground. And flying a little device that they can't see when they're coming, it's actually a really dangerous situation. But it will be used for agriculture pretty heavily.
I agree, and the crop duster pilots are some of the craziest pilots ever, and they have their own landing strips in their backyard, so they feel no responsibility to look out for anything smaller than themselves.
So I have a landing strip in my backyard, by the way. I also grew up on a farm. So I think we're only beginning to imagine the possibilities. On my particular farm that I grew up on, we had cattle that had to be fenced. There were sources of water. You had to pay attention to where the grass was okay versus not, see if there was something down versus not. It's very easy to just fly overhead and look for where the groups of cattle are and count them from the video, not because you've driven a truck for an hour to find the back corner over terrain that's difficult to get across or around. People aren't talking about that, but that's something that he could do today with that little drone. He could stay below where any manned aircraft ever flies, but right now you'd have to call yourself a hobbyist to do it. So that's a problem. The reality is that farming provides a way for us to fly at low altitude without having all of this regulatory process. And at the same time, we can develop the technologies and understand how the payloads should be interacting with these vehicles. So, all the things that Danny said, if you look at rural applications, I once did a performance comparison of a Cessna inspecting a pipeline that had 2 people on board and could fly for several miles, obviously, compared to a fixed-wing powered glider that weighed about 25 pounds because it needed enough energy capacity to fly it long enough distance. And if you look at environmental impact, you can't even plot them on the same chart because if you only have to carry 25 pounds, you just don't use the energy. So we talk about green and carbon footprint. We need to be unmanned for a lot of those applications to actually claim that we're green.
May I please ask a question of our esteemed colleague from the State Police?
Absolutely.
We are seeing a history. I know you have a lot of social concerns. The first police department to be authorized to use drones. Could you please describe some of the hoops that obviously you must have had to jump through to bring your dream of working with drones to a reality where you have a working model there?
Well, being a police agency, there's a lot of concerns with privacy rights, but probably the best move that we did is we actually set forth our policies of how we envisioned using it, and we met with the ACLU and went over a lot of the concerns and showed them how we planned on using it and showed them our policies, and that was probably the best move we could have made because we really wanted to be transparent in everything that we did, because we didn't want to really screw it up. We know this is great technology, we know it can help, and so we wanted to make sure that the public was at ease, and that really helped us out more than anything else we did.
Question to the panel. So there's a concern about the use of the airspace over your house. Would a possible, how would you solve the problem? Would you provide like
In Texas, it's being solved by shotguns. I've flown down there, and you ask anybody in the state of Texas, and they own anything that they can see from their property is something they explicitly own. So I've never had more people, tell me, "Oh, look, trap practice," when I've been down there getting ready to fly. So I think the FAA is in a rough position. Obviously, there has to be some kind of organization to our skies and the national airspace. And, believe it or not, people do fly at 50 feet sometimes, especially in rural areas. And there might be a landing strip next to you, you don't even know about it. So, I think that definitely that's something that hopefully common sense prevails. There's going to be a lot of arguing as that one gets solved. Right now, I would recommend, and I try to follow as a rule, fly private property with the owner's permission. And this is very important to you young people. Take it from an old person that's dedicating a lot of time and energy to staying out of trouble. Respect authority. If a police officer or a fireman or a parking lot attendant tells you he's not comfortable with you flying your drone in their space that they have authority over, just stop. Land it and go somewhere else. It's a big country. You have to respect the people in authority. While there might not be specific rules against something you're doing, interfering with, making someone in authority feel uncomfortable is the equivalent of a crime, you will find out. And just be careful and don't antagonize everybody. Just keep putting the good foot forward.
So there's rules of the road and rules of the land and rules of the sky. And there's rules for everything, yes. I think that's what I heard. I think the question now is, in this highly contested atmosphere layer that touches the ground, what rules are appropriate and which ones do we follow? The reality is that if you're flying over a town, a public park, 5 feet above the ground, the rules that we have to apply are of disorderly conduct and other things that we already have. I'm looking that way because it's going to be the police that are standing on the ground, maybe using drones, maybe not, that need to enforce those laws. So I imagine a future, if this NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for Small UAS, actually comes to pass, it's only good from 0 to 500 feet. Take that 0. There will be a time where someone could call Detroit Air Traffic Control, Ann Arbor Air Traffic Control. They might be authorized to fly over your child's schoolyard because no other planes were flying there. They have no idea what athletic events are going on in that playground. It has to be the people on the ground that give permission and deny that very lowermost layer of airspace. The Supreme Court in 1946, in a case called United States versus Cosby, has already established that there is a layer of immediate reaches airspace that goes above 0. Absolutely, it's not 0, defined as a layer that is owned and controlled by the landowner. If it's public property, then it is owned and controlled by the municipality that has that land, or the public park, or whatever it is. We have to be very vigilant to make sure we draw that line, because the Supreme Court didn't say whether it was 5 feet, 100 feet, or 500 feet, but we can't let it be 0, and that's a big deal. If we have this layer, then many of these questions just become moot points. If you're flying in immediate reaches airspace, you're subject to the laws of the land, and the police can enforce them. If you're flying over a farm, you're subject to needing to get permission from the landowner. And the landowner can call the authorities if you do something wrong or fly there without permission. I might be able to rent my airspace over my farm to Amazon and make money. And I might do that if I'm struggling. But if the FAA assumes ownership and control of my immediate reaches airspace, I won't even be able to think about doing that because it won't be mine.
All right, thank you very much. Could we have a round of applause for our drone panel?